I was one of the Native American children, adopted at birth and removed from our country's Indian reservation system. I was raised in a small middle-class farming community, but was never told of my true American Indian heritage. It was still taboo back in those early days. The years passed, and in 1987 I lost both parents. While going through their personal belongings, my wife discovered my adoption papers and she began a search. 5 years later, I was reunited with my biological Lakota family, living on the Lower Brule Sioux Indian Reservation of South Dakota. I am a son of two mothers and a product of two worlds that had collided, but I have an equal amount of love and pride for both. I'm Paul LaRouche, and the stories you are about to see are an attempt to share this true American story of a hidden heritage.
Hello, I'm Paul LaRouche. Thank you for joining us this week on Hidden Heritage. 500 years ago, the Europeans came to America, settled the East Coast, then came the Great Westward Expansion. Finally, some 400 years later, the frontier closed in on an area that we call the Northern Plains. The memories of the old days are still fresh in the minds of the last remaining elders from the tribes of the Northern Plains. Join us now as we take a look and a visit with some of the elders from the Northern Plains.
My name is Jerome Kills Small. My Lakota name is Haluta. It's red-breasted robin. But I call myself Cardinal because the eyes are black and I was blind when I was a baby, and that's how I got that name. Haluta, red-breasted cardinal, from Just Steed. I'm from the Pine Ridge Oglala Nation, and I teach here at the University of South Dakota. I taught here for 18 years now. I'm an instructor of the Lakota language, the culture, oratory, and urbanization and native peoples. My mom gave birth to me when she was 14, so I was placed at Kyle at a home. But the couple who were supposed to be my new parents worked in Nebraska, in the potato fields, corn fields, and the hay and the cattle. And before automation, before the machinery came around, they didn't have any balers or even rakes, combines yet. So we used threshers. They were away. So a old couple who were born in the mid 1800s were taking care of me. And so I spoke only Lakota as a baby boy. And I listened to the people who came to visit them. They were in their late 80s, and when they were in their 90s, they passed away, and I got to be with them all those years. So I heard a lot of stories, and they visited them all the time. And I didn't know at that time that they were medicine people. They always had tents outside, and they would put everything in tents and just the home with no furniture, just a potbelly stove out in the middle. And that's where they had ceremonies. And they celebrated Christmas and New Year's wachipi, powwows there. It was against the law, so some things we had to do in secret or do it in the same time as holidays. So they thought we were celebrating Christmas or Thanksgiving or New Year's. So the agent and the tribal police, they wouldn't be telling on us. Well, this is looking back and remembering and putting it together why we had to do things at the same time as holidays. And so I was trying to figure it out myself, what was going on, after I knew about the regulations against ceremonies and that they would take your annuities away. And they still live those dregs of the old way, even into the 1940s and the 50s. They still did the same thing because they were ingrained to always hide and always be careful and watchful because they were always watched by the Indian agent. And I was fortunate because I was never given away to a family in the cities. I was hidden practically. So I was fortunate to be hidden with the grandma and the grandpa. Otherwise, my mom, my biological mom, if she had a child and she didn't want the child, it probably would have taken me and adopted me to a family off the reservation. So I was really fortunate and to hear all those stories every evening. We came through the 49 blizzard, and that's when I started to remember because it scared me to life. The sounds, the whistles around the log home, the nailing of the quilts on the windows, and my grandpa trying to cool the stovepipe down because the draft from the blizzard was pulling the heat, and the stovepipe's getting red toward the ceiling. So he had a basin, and he was cooling it down. And the dog was in the house. They never let the dog in. It was a huge dog, and its tail was like this. And later on, I read that when a dog's tail was like this, that he had a lot of dignity. And so later on, I said, oh, Jerry had a lot of dignity. Well, his name was Jerry. He was there before I was. When I arrived there, my name was Jerry too. But my grandma and grandpa, those old people, they were my great-great-grandma and grandpa. They couldn't speak English. So they called the dog Jelly. And so I was Jelly too. There's two Jellies, and I think it served my grandmother well because when she wanted me to come home to eat when we were playing, she would say, Jelly, and me and the dog would be both running back. So I shared a name with a dog. At an early age, I really started to acquaint myself with the equalness of all things, even with the name sharing with a dog, and really my best friend. And we had horses. Now, for a old couple who didn't know English, didn't read or write, they had a lot of horses, and they had wagons, and they even had a sleigh to go to the store in the winter. And in the summer, when we went to the store, Jerry or Jelly would be running underneath the wagon in the shade, and I would peek under and see if he was still there. So I knew he was really intelligent, and to be cool in the shade. My grandma and grandpa, they would put their thumbprint on their old age check. That's what they call it. And they left a check there, and we would buy groceries, rice, sugar, salt, and all the groceries there. And then when they went again, they signed a paper and they put their thumbprint down, probably a receipt. And so when they put the thumbprint down and then put an X, then that was ikazo. And before using the thumbprint, they had to make the X, and then it graduated to a thumbprint later on. So that's when they probably started to save thumbprints of the people. You could see the gradual change as I grew up into the 50s, and they were still alive in the 50s. If they were in the 90s, that means they were born in the mid-1800s. That told me, when I looked back, that they came through the Battle of the Little Bighorn, Wounded Knee, a lot of the hardships through the Great Depression, through World War I and II, but they were very calm, and they always laughed. And they always ate with somebody, practically every meal. I didn't know people were bringing them food, but they would cook there too. My grandma and grandpa, they would cook, and I would eat with them. And now I tell my students, I say, eat with your families. That's the best intimacy that you can have. And so I tell my students how I felt, how secure I felt, and how good I felt with this old couple. And I think that's what made me heal later on when I became an alcoholic. I went to them and the sounds. That's what made me get back to my culture, was a drum. So I always carry this around wherever I go. And so I became a storyteller, basically, because I wanted to tell what I experienced with these people. But one thing I remember about my grandmother when she was standing on a chair and nailing the quilts was when some things rolled down the prairies, clang, 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 and hit the side of the home and roll away, she would name them. That was the bathtub that was hanging on the harness shed. He, wiuzazawa, chaunk, o ganakil hel, otskil he exto he. Na, he ish, chegalawa, chaokak seel, yankel on he on he. And that was the pail that was at the wood pile. And so she was naming things that was hitting the wall. And so I knew that she was telling me what they were, probably so I wouldn't be as afraid. This sounded very, very dangerous. There was a hum in the sky, and it was an emergency. I could tell it was an emergency. There were a lot of things that were unnatural, and so I was apprehensive. I was wondering what's going on, and I remember I had mittens on. I had red overshoes on, like the men have with the buckles. I had Levi's on. I had a Mackinac coat on. That's a Hudson Bay. Little boys, I was like 4 years old. And I don't think they made those for little boys that you could buy. So they must have made this for me to emulate or the same as men would wear. And I had a stocking cap. And I must have gotten tired because when I woke up, I had some wool socks over my mittens, and I was covered with a lot of blankets, and I pushed them off. I couldn't touch the floor, but I jumped off because my grandfather was pushing the snow away to get out. And when we came out of the home, our home was partly covered with snow. I looked up at the sky and it was clear, and it was the bluest sky I ever saw. I never did notice it before, but I knew the language already, but I didn't know to look around or ask. So I think my first science question was, Grandpa, how come the sky's blue? And he said, It's always that way. And here's my first science question. Dakawe, why? And he says, it's been like that forever. And again, Dakawe, why? So he says, ordinarily it's that way. And I said, Dakawe. And he says, ask your grandma. So later, not right then, but later I asked Grandma, I said, Grandma, and she says, it's already that way. And I said, ask your grandpa. And so it ended there. I never did know why the sky was blue for a long, long time. And they would sing as they were going. They would be singing songs as they were going down the valley, probably getting ready for the next gathering, the next Wachipi. And so I heard a lot of those songs. And the other night, one came back to me. So I always carry a recorder. I got 3 of them ready to go. So I would turn one on and sing it so I wouldn't forget it. I'm at the age where if I was at a pub, how was that song? How did it go? But now I could go to the number and play it. And then I would teach the singers. Here's an old song that you probably will recognize. It probably wasn't sung for a long, long time. But the young ones would come over and say, is that a new song? I would say, no, it's just the old song we're trying to bring back. And so it helps to remember those old people for me, and they fed me early in the morning. I ate with them, and they were so kindly that they would tiptoe to the bed and they said, grandson, are you awake now? And if I didn't want to get up, hanging halfway off the bed or just sleeping like a cat, really at ease. And if I wanted to get up, then I'd go nod my head. And they would put the skillet on the stove and I could hear eggs and the chopped meat frying, biscuits coming out of the oven. And I would hear the favorite thing I always like at Collective. And they were cutting the government cheddar cheese. And then I would get up because that's my favorite. And in those days, they had good government cheddar cheese. I love that so much. And I got to eat with them. And I would go wash up and I would get up on the table and sit with them. And there would be knocks on the door. They never go see who it is. They'd say, come in. And somebody would come in and they would take their overshoes off and they would put another plate and coffee and then they would visit. And that's my story time because they tell about things. They talked about things and I was learning from them. And so I started to tell my students, I said, when you have a calling, when we have to humblechea, we have to go to the vision quest to get our calling of what we are here on earth for. What am I doing here? What do I have to be? What am I going to be? That's a vision quest time. That was my interpretation of what the vision quest was, to find your niche in society. Where do I fit in of all these values? The patient people, the generous people, the ones with fortitude, the ones with knowledge. Which one am I? And I came back with songs. So I started carrying a drum. And so that's all I had I had songs going through my mind because of those old people. And so that's what I brought back. And I sang a song in the lodge when I came back that I thought of while I was praying and thinking. And a lot of people have visions, but I didn't. I just had things come to me and the melodies. And I knew that I was part of the immense pulse of creation. Because when that tree turned on, the cicadas, they sing, zoom, 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 zoom. When that turned off, this one turned on. Over there, a tree, zoom, zoom, zoom. When that turned off, one over here. And I knew there was a pattern. After 4 days and 4 nights, you recognize the pattern. And you recognize when the little coyotes are going to start riding around. You recognize a lot of songs that you're immersed in. And I was a part of it. And I was really happy that I was a part of this immense creation. And that's what I had to offer when I came back. And it helped me to then know that I'm a singer and a storyteller. I tell my students this is a time where we have much capabilities. We have the media, and we have many types of devices to communicate every day, instantly. And with that, the next level should be a time of truth. That's what I look forward to, when we can go back and retell and tell the truth about things, so everything would iron itself out. I know that many people who are thinking like I do are saying the same thing. Many of the people who communicate are starting to reach other people, even so far as to give information about even donating kidneys to help somebody to live and to really help one another. And I know there's a spirit in there that does that. And I think that our whole communication system needs a spirit to run through it. Every community needs a spirit to hold it together. A bigger spirit, your communication spirit, should be titled and named, so we would recognize that there is a spirit in this communication that we have. Hechetuelo.
Thank you for joining us this week on Hidden Heritage and our visit with the elders.